Right. Good evening and welcome to the Hartland Township Planning Commission meeting of Thursday, May 25th, 2017. We'd like to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mike, would you take roll, please?
Yes. Chairman Fox?
Here.
Jeff Newsom. Keith Boyd. Joe Kalani.
Here.
Sue Grissom.
Here.
Tom Murphy.
Here.
And myself.
All right. Thank you very much. Next up, item 4 is approval of our meeting agenda.
So moved.
Support.
We have a motion from Commissioner Kalani, a second from Commissioner Mitchell. Are there any changes? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next up, approval of our meeting minutes from April 23rd or April 13th, 2017.
So moved.
Support.
We have a motion from Commissioner Grissom, second from Commissioner Murphy. Are there any changes? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next up is item 6, call to the public. If you are here for item 7, which is the rezoning applicant for this evening, there's an opportunity during that time for you to come forward. Otherwise, anybody else is welcome to do so right now. Any comments? All right. We'll close the call to the public, and we'll move right on to our agenda item number 7A, which is our rezoning application number 17-001. And this is a rezoning. And what I would like to do is just give you, in a public hearing, give you a brief outline of how we run a public hearing in Hartland. And then we'll get the ball moving. We'll start out first. We'll open the public hearing in a moment. We'll turn the floor over to our township planner for all of his comments. We'll invite the applicant up to make any presentation, anything they would like to add. Then the applicant will return back to his seat. We'll then invite you guys up. Anybody that wants to come up and make a public comment in regards to this particular agenda item can do so. We'll close the public hearing. And then the Planning Commission, the applicant, and the planner will discuss the project. We have a review letter we'll go through. Any of the questions that you may ask or statements you might make during the public hearing, your time, what we will do is just write those down. We won't give you those answers or get them right at that moment in time, but when we return still this evening for this topic, we will get those answers for you. So what I'd like to do is open the public hearing at 7:03 p.m. for the applicant, Aslan McLean Architectural Group, tax ID number 4708-08-200-027. The applicant has requested to rezone 74.5 acres of land from CA Conservation Agriculture and GC General Commercial to LI Light Industrial. The property is located on the southwest corner of Clyde Road and Old US 23. And for the public record, all public notice requirements for this public hearing have been met. So what I'd like to do is turn the floor over to our planner, Troy Langer.
Thank you. Let me try to get an aerial view of the property. This is 23 going north and south. This is Clyde Road. This is the intersection. I'll zoom in just a little bit here, just to kind of give you a general view of the area. It's about a 94-acre property in its entirety. The applicant is not requesting to rezone the entire piece. I'll go over that in a little bit more detail. I just want to give you this map for just a general understanding where the property is. I will look at a zoning map here. This again is 23 going north and south. Right here is Clyde Road. This is the property in this area. And currently, the vast majority of this property is in the CA, which is Conservation Agricultural zoning category. This map kind of depicts the former tax parcel numbers that used to exist. This property used to be made up of 4 separate parcels, one being right here, another being here, a third one there, and then the smallest one in the extreme north, or the southwest corner of Clyde in 23 is actually red in color, and that 0.9 acre piece is zoned GC General Commercial. So the vast majority of this property is zoned CA. There's this small portion of it at the extreme corner that's zoned commercial. They're requesting to rezone that piece that's zoned commercial, as well as the other portions through here that are zoned CA. They are not requesting to rezone this portion over here. Their goal is to remain consistent with the future land use plan. I'll show you the future land use map for this area. Again, Clyde Road here, 23. The purple designation on the future land use map is the research and development and industrial category. And I'll zoom in a little bit if I can. So you can see on this map that that small piece that was zoned commercial, as well as these other pieces, are in that research and office development and planned industrial category. But this portion over here, it's about a 20-acre piece, is not in that category. This is a residential category over here. So the applicant is leaving this piece to remain in the, or is requesting to just leave that piece remain in the CA category. There's a little bit of history with this property I just want to touch on. This property was part, or had been approved for a private recreation facility. Turnin 2 was the name of that facility that went through the process to receive approval here at the township. They actually even started construction by grading the site, clearing some of the vegetation off of there, even installed a part of the foundation of the building there, and then they decided to no longer pursue that project. They came to the township to request their performance bond be released. The township, as part of that approval to release the performance bond, also permitted them, as part of their request, to allow the building materials for that building are still on the site. The township allowed them 1 year to have the building stored on the site. That 1 year will be coming up here in June. They are trying to market this property for a light industrial or research and development office type facility. The first step there is to rezone the property, and they're requesting to do so.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Would you like to come forward, maybe introduce yourself to everyone, and anything you would like to add?
Good evening. My name is John Aslan from Aslan McLean Architectural Group. I'm here representing the owner this evening. I think Troy, the planner, summed it up quite nicely. Our request is consistent with the future land use plan, and it was always the intention of my client that once the property became unviable for softball use, that he was going to turn it into an industrial facility, assuming we could get the zoning, which again is consistent with the master plan. So I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Okay. I think what we'll do is have you return to the audience, and you might be up soon. I don't know. But we're going to allow the public now to come forward. If there are any comments, questions you have, again, we'll make note of those. And then we'll have the applicant come back up and we'll get some answers for you. So is there anybody in the audience that would like to come forward, make a statement, and or have any questions? Hello. If we could get your name. What else are you looking for in there now, Troy? Are you looking for the address, too?
Yeah, there's a form to fill out if you can, maybe after you're speaking, if you could fill that out and just leave it at the table, just so your name and your address, so when we prepare the minutes, we can spell your name properly and get your address proper. So,
All right, good
Well,
evening.
I really, at this point, have a question. I mean, we don't know what he's proposing to do there. We just know what the zoning is. What is he planning to do? And my other statement is, of course, we who live in Parshallville are very concerned about what this is going to be.
Okay.
That's basically
All
it.
right. Okay, great, thank you. Anyone else?
Denise Urban.
Travis Walk, and we reside at 9742 Clyde, which is the property that's directly,
West.
that abuts the property.
Right next door.
Okay.
So I guess just a couple of comments to start off with is our grave disappointment at what happened to the property in the first place. As you well know, it was stripped of 50, 60-some acres of trees and left to sit there and rot once the project fell through for whatever reason we don't know at this point, or at least it hasn't been explained to us. And topsoil, there's really, and even returning it to its natural state, which looked like it was supposed to be done, it's still, if you drive by there, and I don't know if any of you haven't seen, what it looks like, but it looks like just a garbage heap. I mean,
Eyesore.
it's an eyesore, for the community, for the people that live there and pass by it all the time. So as far as any faith or confidence of what's going to happen in the future when it is rezoned, I guess I'm just at a loss. And, I understand that it does fit in with the future. What the map was drawn up, what was it, 2015, I think, was the original that I saw for the future plans of it.
We were here 2 years ago when
Yeah.
the turn-in-two was being proposed.
And so, in fitting with the light industrial, that's a wide array of different projects. Could it be a slaughterhouse? Could it be, a doctor's office? Could it be, what's it going to be? Is it going to be big lights? Is it going to be loudspeakers? I mean, I don't know, and for living out there, and the reason we moved out there was because we love the country, So I'm just a little concerned, just like the other resident had expressed, of what is exactly going to go there. And I guess I'm concerned, too, that it's, all of a sudden, the property isn't even, it's being marketed, which was what it sounded like. They're marketing it already as light industrial. Well, it's not light industrial, it's CA. And so they're obviously wanting to come in, they want to rezone it as light industrial so they can get more money for it, so it has more mass appeal, so we can get more tax dollars in there. Because right now, the tax dollars are just based off of land, which is minimal. So the concern is what's going in with the future proposed. Do we have any say-so for that, other than, hey, we live here, we don't want to see a slaughterhouse go next door, or, can it be a park? It's nice that they decided to leave the 20 acres behind us as CA and not do that, but I guess I would want to voice, if we had any say-so, to strictly adhere to what is in the township documents as far as what has to go in next to there, as far as having the buffer zone, planting trees and all that stuff. Because I know that when it fell through and they came in and they stripped all those trees, now I can see the cars pass by,
You hear everything a lot more.
You hear everything.
Steel's all just sitting there.
And I got to spend more money because I've got more deer in my yard.
Well, and there was also trees planted, but they were planted.
8 trees were planted, 6 died.
There's only 2 that are alive. They were never watered. They were planted during a drought period, and they all pretty much almost all died. We actually tried to water them at one point, but there's only 2 that are even living.
But so from a private homeowner standpoint or viewpoint, it just screams lack of responsibility for the property. And I know that might not have been their intention originally, but that's kind of what it looks like has happened. You've got clear cut, move stuff, drop some steel in some other stuff that looks, like an eyesore, and here you are now trying to rezone. It's like, well, what about the people who live here? So just being interested to see what the plans are, and I guess hear from you guys.
Okay, thank you. Good evening.
My name's Jeffrey Castle. I live in Parshallville. I guess I'm going to back up previous speakers, what they've been saying. Unfortunately, what happened with that property is a shame. I moved here a couple years ago and was only able to just step in right as Turn-In 2 was taking a footing there. I guess my concern for you tonight is the protection of our community. I understand that the board in 2015 reviewed the area and realized that this was going to be a light industrial section of Hartland Township. I understand that, and I know that's part of the plan. What I would like to see, I think maybe what the community would like to see, is a bit of protection by rezoning it today, or starting that process today and allowing the property to be rezoned prior to its sale to whatever business or client ends up purchasing it. What protection does the community have in who its neighbors are? I think part of the issue is that light industrial does umbrella so many different types of businesses that we could have anything. I mean, short of a full-on heavy-duty manufacturing facility, but there's a lot of things that could come in there that may not be pleasant for the community. This is something that we all see. That's the only exit until you get to M59, so we all get off there. It's, as it was stated before, it's a rural type of community. We like to keep it that way. So, I'm hoping that you will look at this like we need to move forward, but carefully, by not permitting this as light industrial now, so that when there is a potential buyer that might be interested as a light industrial facility there, that we can reapproach this and actually see who comes in before it's permitted.
Okay.
You can't do that.
Yeah. Well,
It's unfortunate.
yeah, it is.
I know. I understand where you're coming from. I think it's important.
We'll get there, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we need to talk about what they need to understand about the site.
Right.
It isn't just 2015. It's been sitting there, light industrial, going back almost 20. I know 20 years.
Right.
So,
And we'll cover that.
okay.
We'll cover that.
Okay.
Okay?
All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Well, good evening.
Good evening. Jim Carr. I'm at 9690 Clyde, so next to Denise and Travis.
Okay.
I guess hearing from the applicant, it either sounds like they're going to try to develop themselves, or our leaning, or my leaning was more probably rezone so they could sell it and dump their loss. My only concern is if they keep it, there was kind of 5 items that they were supposed to do between last year and now. It's all in kind of the agreement in your notes, trees, putting the ground back. They've really only done 2. They put trees in, they've died, and they've cut the driveway off. No ground cover. The foundation you can still see poking out of the ground. It actually turns into a marsh when it rains, which is kind of odd because it's high in the ground. So the concern is if they're going to continue on, that all those things that they said they were going to do, those things that you required that they do, they haven't done. And that's kind of I know there's other areas of development that have kind of faced the same kind of problems where they were supposed to do these things, the developers, and they didn't, but there's no recourse. They just sit there and allowed to do it. So my concern is it's 11 days until they were supposed to, remove steel or make sure all this stuff is done, or the township takes their bond money or escrow funds and kind of put it back to what they were supposed to have done between last year and the 5th of June. So my big concern is there. Can they, if they're going to develop it, they are up to the 11:30 hour and they haven't done what they said they were going to do. So my concern is, what are they going to do between now and then? Or if they say they're going to put in certain things for buffer and appease the neighbors, but decide not to, they're basically doing that now. So that's our big concern.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yep. Anyone else this evening? All right, I guess if not, we'll close the public hearing at 7:20, and we'll ask the applicant to come on back up to the table. I know probably some of you were taking notes, and we also have a review letter, but I think what I want to do first is have Troy explain what can you do with a parcel of land that's zoned LI should the change take place. And then maybe you weren't here, but a clarification in response to a comment Joe made. I think the last date on the future land use map may be 2015, but I don't know if we know how far back that
Well, it
particular...
certainly goes back to when I was on the planning commission back in 2009, I think 20, how was it on the council?
I've been...
2002, 2003.
Okay,
It
so...
might even before that as well.
Okay, so
There's certain areas, that whole corner was actually I think it's supposed to be some sort of planning, light industrial planning area.
Yeah, that area up there has been planned for this for a long time, but the current map shows 2015. That's the last time we updated it. We updated other sections of it, but the whole map gets a new date at that point.
I want to hear I wanted some answers to the fact that the last gentleman spoke. Why, if there's things that haven't been done, why they haven't been done.
Yep.
And why are we considering a zoning request before those are taken care of?
Yep.
That's kind of my concern. So.
Okay. Well, Troy, first, for the benefit of everybody in the room, why don't you explain what they can do, what's special use, what could happen to this property if this change took place?
Okay. So what I've got here is a page from the zoning ordinance that outlines the permitted uses in the light industrial category. And every zoning category identifies uses that are principal permitted uses and those uses that are special land uses. And any use that's a special land use essentially requires a special use permit, which would require a public hearing, notice sent to property owners within 300 feet. Planning Commission would make a recommendation, and then the Township Board would have final say. On the other category, where it's a principal permitted use, that means the developer or the applicant would come in with a site plan showing how they want to develop the property with that use. It would require site plan approval by the Planning Commission. It would not require sending notice out to property owners within 300 feet. So those are the two different categories. The special land use, the reason that one requires extra noticing is it may not be deemed appropriate on every piece of property zoned light industrial. There could be site-specific concerns with those uses, or the Planning Commission and the Township Board may want to impose specific conditions with those uses. The uses that are permitted, and anyone can read these at any time, they're in the zoning ordinance, which is available on our website, but by just reading them, you'll see that it's research and design and testing, vocational schools, computer programming, professional medical offices, financial institutions with the drive-through service, publicly owned buildings, essential services, buildings and storage yard, public-private parks, outdoor seating and dining areas, light industrial uses, business services, mini warehouse, commercial greenhouse, lumber yards, public buildings again, public utility buildings. So those are your permitted uses, requires approval by the Planning Commission. The site plan has to conform to all of the other standards in the zoning ordinance. Some of the accessory uses, these would be something that you could have if it were in conjunction with a permitted use or with a permitted special use. That would be a commercial greenhouse, a personal fitness center, caretakers, living quarters, and some accessory buildings and uses. So that gives a list of what would be permitted by right, so to speak. The special land uses would be a child daycare or adult daycare facility, indoor tennis facility or recreation center, urgent care, motel, hotel, standard restaurants, freezer, locker, cold storage, heliports, radio, television, and communication tower, outdoor storage accessory to a permitted use, any of the uses of the same nature or class as permitted as principal or special use permit but not listed in the zoning ordinance elsewhere could be deemed to be appropriate here, and automobile repair major. So that's the list of uses that's allowed in this district.
So if we rezone the property, if it ultimately gets to that point and it's rezoned to LI, they're permitted anything of a principal permitted use.
That's correct.
And they're going to go through a normal site plan procedure. They're going to have standards by the zoning ordinance, setbacks,
Yep.
parking lots, architecture, landscaping.
And there is no proposal with this current request. And that may seem a little odd, but in the context of looking at rezonings, that is actually preferred. That gets the Planning Commission looking at all of the uses that could occur. If the applicant came tonight with a plan, I'll just pick an office building, and it looked like, oh, that'll be fine, and then the property's rezoned, the applicant is under no obligation to continue with that office building. And if that applicant came back and said that plan fell through, now I want to do something else permitted in the light industrial district, we would have to review it, much like any other plan. So from a planning standpoint, it is almost better to proceed without any proposal. That way your mind is not focused on any particular thing and you're more open to examine everything that's permitted and whether you think this is an appropriate zoning for this area. And if you think it's the right time, you certainly have that ability to say it's just not the right time. So.
Now, Joe, you had a question. Why don't we?
I had a question, and I don't know if Troy can answer it.
Yeah, he may. But between the two, we might get some answers.
Yeah, there was a gentleman that talked about some of the things that weren't done following the Turner 2 that didn't come to fruition.
Yes, some of those I'm hearing for the first time myself. The installation of trees, we did go out and inspect after they were installed. We do have a code enforcement officer. He's part-time, 2 days a week, and that's first I've heard that those trees had died. So we will certainly visit that with the property owner. Unfortunately, I can't have our one code enforcement officer out visiting every single site. He's got a long list of things that he's pursuing currently, and this is the first I've heard of that. So I haven't been involved in this Turner 2 project. That was before my time here. I'm just kind of dealing with the aftermath of it. And the other thing I think he mentioned was the foundation. Well, I think he said there was 8 things they had to do, and only a couple of them had been done. It's my understanding that there was vegetative cover put on the property sufficient to comply with the county drain commissioner's requirements. So if there's concerns that there's no vegetative cover on there, that, again, is news to me. And when I communicated with the county drain commissioner's office, that was not my understanding. The foundation that's partially below the surface that was supposed to be covered, again, that's the first I've heard of that, and we can certainly check into that. I don't know if I hit them all, if there was some...
Yeah, I'm just curious why, isn't there a requirement that they be in compliance with the condition of it before they should be considering a zoning?
Well, those conditions were part of the board's approval when they released the performance bond. there were two things that they had. They had a performance bond, and they had escrow money. Escrow funds are actually kind of cash sitting in a township account that the township can grab readily if the applicant fails to do certain things. The performance bond, that's a little bit trickier to get funds from a bonding company for that purpose, but the bond itself costs money each year to have a bond, and they were asking to have that released. The township felt that I think it was $42,000 and some change, maybe just under $43,000, was sufficient money to have essentially in a cash format to cover removal of those building materials and or assist in getting vegetative cover on there if needed. So those were just conditions associated with the release of the bond.
Okay, so we currently have money on hand?
Yep.
So if we had to fix the problem that some of the residents are concerned with right now, it could be done?
We could. We'd have to give the applicant reasonable time to cure. One might say, well, they've had a year, but we'd have to document that we made them aware of it. We noticed them of we're getting a little bit into code enforcement complaint stuff, but you have to give them reasonable time to either correct the problem or seek alternative remedies, and we'd have to go through a procedure, but yes.
Well, maybe, Mr. Aslan, do you have any update or information on any of these 8 items, and are you familiar with them?
I'm not specifically familiar with them. However, I mean, if they were supposed to be done, they should have been done. To my knowledge, they were. Hearing that they haven't been done, I did drive by the property, and I did see that you can see the foundation, so it probably wasn't covered as well as it could have been. But I can't speak to those issues. Mm-hmm. All I can speak to is the request for the rezoning and basically when that building was designed for turn-in 2 as the indoor softball training area, it was also designed for future use as an industrial building. In other words, we verified that the setbacks would be proper for that use also. Mm-hmm. Everything was set up so that when in fact it wasn't to be used for softball, it could be marketed for industrial should the zoning be changed. Mm-hmm. Back when the world fell apart, industrial buildings were cheap. Right now they're very, very hard to find. I believe that most of the industrial property in this township is already used. I don't believe there is anymore. And people are looking for it, and a piece on the expressway between Flint and Ann Arbor is extremely desirable from a light industrial standpoint. We've been talking to people. I've come up with some designs for several people. All that we need to do to modify it for light industrial use is to add some truck docks to it. So that's where I've been directed, and I've been working on that. And certainly someone couldn't buy it unless it were zoned properly to be used for light industrial.
So is the answer asking the question of a couple people, what is the plan? You're thinking an industrial park of some variety, and the thoughts are to parcel off lands within the industrial park. Do you have a? We don't want to see a plan, as Troy said, but what's the idea?
I don't have a master plan. I know the idea is to take the building that's there.
Yeah.
We all remember what it looks like. Mm-hmm. It's going to look exactly like it looked like, except it's going to have truck docks and be used for light industrial use.
Okay.
The owner owns a company. They make hose fittings for automobiles, and that fits exactly in the light industrial category.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Troy, can you address just a little bit before we get into the review letter? What are the protections for the neighborhood? We have a zoning ordinance. We have requirements.
Yeah, we have the zoning ordinance has a number of protections built in for setback requirements, for noise, screening, sound, that are all in place. If this property, it's a hypothetical, if the property were rezoned and the applicant came forward with a use permitted there, there's a number of standards that the building, the parking lot would have to meet to be set back a certain distance, to be properly screened, Anything that's outdoors has to be approved by the Planning Commission as far as its location, as well as screened. Most of the uses permitted in the light industrial are not outdoor activities. They're indoor activities. There's a couple of exceptions to that. As I read through the list, I'm sure you heard those. So there are a number of things that are in the zoning ordinance currently that would limit or minimize the impact of any development on this property.
And not that it makes anybody feel any better, but it's currently zoned CA, which could be farmed. And should a farmer or a person that owns this property choose to farm it, he basically would have the right to come in and level it and grow his crops. He could take it all down.
Yep.
Doesn't make anybody feel any better, but that could happen. Now, maybe a field of corn or soybeans would be better than some raw dirt right now, and I certainly don't think the Turn 2's plan was to take it to where it was and sink all that money into it and then back out of the plan, because I'm reasonably confident that took a lot of money to get it to where it is. So I don't think there's anybody happy in that situation, including the township and the people who made this decision to allow that to happen, and the guy who put all the money in it. Are there any other, we're going to hit the letter here in a second. Are there any other background questions you want answered? They can come up as we review the letter too, but anything else you want to touch on right now? If not, let's take a look at the staff letter dated May 18th. Pretty much many of the first pages are the background. They're topics we already talked about. So if we go to packet page number 17, down in your lower right corner, just down there at the bottom, zoning ordinance, rezoning criteria. It says Hartland Township zoning ordinance under section 7.4.3 provides the Planning Commission and Township Board with the following criteria to consider in making its findings and recommendation for a decision. So if we touch on each of these, I think we'll probably cover most of the points that we need to talk about. So looking at the first one, section A, consistency with the adopted comprehensive plan. Troy?
So the future land use plan, I don't know if I can find where I've got that. It's this purple color, which is planned industrial research and development. There are actually 3 zoning categories that would fit under this future land use category. And those categories are industrial, light industrial, and then research and development. The applicant has picked light industrial. If you think of those in terms of intensity, with industrial probably allowing the most intense, and research and park development probably being the least intense, light industrial then I guess would be somewhere in between there. What I've provided in the packet is not only information for light industrial, but I've also provided information for you on the research and development category as well. The comprehensive plan also speaks specifically to this area and has some specific requirements that I don't feel the industrial category truly meets, but the light industrial or the research and development park are arguably consistent with the comprehensive plan here. So,
okay. Comments on that?
No.
All righty. Item B is compatibility with the site's physical, geological, hydrological, and other environmental features.
So this is an aerial photograph with kind of the property line overlay of that. This is probably before any development. You can see this is the property. There was a number of trees throughout. It's certainly more wooded on that 20-acre piece that is not being proposed. Also, I do want to show you, bear with me, a wetland map. This map here is if you've ever gone to the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality website and looked at wetland maps from their site, this comes from that. They have a map that identifies where potential wetlands are. To my knowledge, there has not been a wetland inventory of this particular property, but it appears there's a drain that runs in this area through here, so it looks like there's some wetland associated with that, as well as in an odd shape, almost squared off, is a potential wetland at this extreme corner of the property up here. Those are kind of the known natural elements on this property. There's no proposed development, but certainly the rezoning of the property to light industrial could allow for compatibility with these type of natural features that exist on the property.
Just a quick question. The general commercial, doesn't that cover that whole land area there?
And again, this is not necessarily accurate. You could actually go out there, not me, I'm not a wetland expert, but somebody qualified to do that could go out there and determine, no, in fact, there's not a wetland. This is just intended to be a guide to draw attention to areas, but it's unusual to see a squared off. Generally, wetlands aren't squared off unless something's been altered to it.
Well, that is rather unique. Two comments to that. We are aware on the south end there, well, the middle of the property, because of the proposed ball fields, we're dealing with the location of that wetland. So there is some water in there. And the second thing is any proposal that would ever come forward, no matter what zoning category, is going to deal with that map. So whether it's LI or one of the residential groups and categories, and a developer came in to put a subdivision in, they're going to deal with that map.
And so just so you know how this works, the wetlands are regulated by the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. The only entity that can truly determine whether that's a wetland or not is the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality itself. So even hiring a wetland consultant to go out doesn't necessarily determine anything. You really need the MDEQ to either agree with that report or agree with that assessment before you really have any true determination on whether or not a wetland exists. So, okay.
Troy, before they prepared the lot for the turning two, wouldn't that have been considered of where they could move their earth, where they could set their footings, etc.?
That was before my time. I'll just have to presume that was looked into.
All done. They ended up having to move the fields due to that. Do you recall that when we were in site plan review with that project? The ball fields and the water? That was pushing the development north and how it was all laid out because they couldn't get too far into it. And that's my memory of that piece, not in detail. Any other questions on that component, that part? C, reasonable return on investment with current classification of CA.
So to me, the property is large enough that it could be developed, even the portion of the property to be rezoned, that there's the potential to be developed to get a reasonable return. I don't know how much the current owner has invested in the property and whether the current owner will ever be made whole. But that's not necessarily the standard we're looking for. Just a reasonable return on investment is the standard that's here. And again, these standards, just to maybe illustrate, these are in the ordinance to make this decision an objective one, so that we're not being arbitrary in how the decision is made, that it's based on these criteria that are outlined in the ordinance. So, and the goal here is that there be a reasonable return on investment, and if this particular applicant is underwater, it's not necessarily up to the township to come up with a zoning category that gets them above water, so to speak, if that makes sense.
Questions on that? All right, D was, well, I guess maybe I will ask a question as it relates to that. This 20-acre-ish approximate piece that is not being requested for rezoning was stated, well, we're not because it doesn't match the future land use map or the comprehensive plan? I know it's not part of this application, but is there any thought on what that's going to be? Is that going to
To my knowledge, there's no thought, but the reason it wasn't included in this request is because it is not matched in the master plan.
Okay. All righty. Paragraph D, compatibility of all potential uses allowed in the LI district with the surrounding uses in the zoning. Troy?
Yeah. So I'm looking at the future land use map here, and I was not part of the conversations that took place with the adoption of the plan, and there's been some discussion as to how long it's been in this configuration, and that's all been very helpful because I didn't, myself, I really didn't know it had been there 20 years. I'm not always researching how long. I'm looking at what is it right now and what has it been in the past recent history. But it appears that the township has established a clear intent of having this intersection with Clyde Road be developed in this research and development and planned industrial future land use category. It immediately abuts some residential. This is medium density urban or medium density suburban. I think it's medium suburban density residential category here. The general goal when you're dealing with compatibility oftentimes is to buffer or transition from commercial, maybe with office in between, and then going on into residential. But it looks like in this case that this has been a long plan to have this area in this category, and you can certainly have this research and development and industrial abutting residential. It's not much different than office in many ways. So in my opinion, and given the time that the board and planning commission have put forth on this, this appears to be consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Questions? Anything? E, capacity of the infrastructure and other public services in the street system.
So on this one, you're looking at, do we have adequate streets? Do we have adequate water and sewer? Do we have adequate infrastructure to support the development of this property? And in this case, you have US 23, you have Old 23 running parallel to that, you have Clyde Road. All of those are streets that would be able to support development on this property. In addition, there is sanitary sewer that is available. I think there's a station across here. I might not have this exact. I think there's a line that runs under, and so the line comes onto this property at about a midpoint and kind of extends south. So there is the availability of public sewer. There is no public water available for this site, but that doesn't by itself preclude development. Already the township had examined a fairly large recreational facility, and that had been approved without public water. So although it would be nice to have public water, my conversations with the Public Works Director are that is many, many years down the road.
Well, and any development is going to deal with the fire marshal in regards to water and sprinkling, and that will be their issue to deal with. Category F, compatibility of the street system. Excuse me. No. G, apparent demand for uses permitted in the requested zoning district.
So this one, we rely heavily on information that the applicant has prepared. They have not given us any particular documents that assist. However, in working with although the applicant is an architect, we've been working with the owner of this property on a couple of development proposals. We've heard from the owner, as well as you've heard from the applicant tonight, that on this corridor of 23 there is interest in research and development and light industrial in this area. And the assessor has indicated to me that virtually all of our light industrial buildings are at close to 100% capacity. So we, from township assessing records, our current facilities are at almost complete capacity. But again, no documents have been submitted as part of this to confirm or support that from the applicant's standpoint.
Questions?
No.
H, ability to comply with zoning regulations.
Well, given the size of this property, we're looking at about 74.5 acres of land to be rezoned, and that would appear to be sufficient size that you could put a building on there, as is evidenced by a building that's already been previously approved, and comply with the requirements for zoning, setback, and parking, and so forth.
Well, and I would just add, there is no site plan, but on 74 acres, there could be a lot more than one.
Yes.
Because by the time you get setbacks and parking out of there, there's still a lot of 74 acres left. Mm-hmm. Particularly with that building at, I don't even remember, 60,000 square feet?
A little over 60,000 square feet, yes.
Okay. Any questions on that? Comments? All righty. We're on I, appropriateness of the requested zoning district. Troy?
So this one kind of goes back to the future land use map as well as the comprehensive plan, and in my mind the Planning Commission should be looking at two zoning categories, the light industrial or the RDP. In my opinion, the industrial category would not be appropriate in this location. So this appears to be appropriate with the comprehensive plan, the light industrial. And I've outlined in the staff report sections of the comprehensive plan that specifically call out this area and what the Planning Commission and the board had in mind when they established this category here. So.
Just want to bring up, I think you had mentioned at some point, maybe it was in a conversation we had, maybe it was here tonight, on, is this the time? Mm-hmm. I guess what you got 4 vacant corners. When is the time? What does somebody has to move first? Now, all 4 aren't going to go at once.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of times the timing aspect of it is based on things like infrastructure. The future land use map is intended to be down the road at some point in the future when the township is ready. This area could become whatever. When the roads are in place, when the water and sewer are in place. And so that's why part of this analysis is looking at are the roads in place? Is it ready to support this type of development? And so that's why I made that comment that just because it's on the future land use plan now doesn't mean we should run out and rezone everything to match the current future land use plan. It may not be ready for all of those areas to immediately be rezoned. So that's why there's this process, this effort, this examination of looking at these sites and determining which sites are appropriate and at what time is it appropriate to rezone those. And that's the task that you have here tonight, is in weighing all of these criteria. You may find theoretically that, yep, it matches the comprehensive development plan, but we just don't think the time is right yet. We think that we need some more things to change or to occur. That's certainly within the authority of the Planning Commission to recommend.
Okay. Item J, amendment of permitted or special uses versus rezoning.
So again, the applicant has not identified any particular use, so therefore, in looking at all of the permitted uses in the light industrial district, the Planning Commission should really look at, does it have any concerns with anything on the list that would cause concern with rezoning this property? If there's anything on that list of permitted uses or special land uses, now's the time to kind of echo those or comment on those concerns and share those with the applicant. I should probably point out, rezonings are a little bit tricky. They're not like site plans that you can take a look at a site plan and say, well, I like this, I don't like that. How about if we approve it, but we place some conditions to soften this part that I don't like? Rezonings are kind of an all or nothing. You don't have any authority to put any conditions on the rezoning. You either are approving the rezoning or you're not. Unfortunately, that's the way the law works on this. So the only person that can actually offer a condition to soften the rezoning is the applicant themselves. So they have to voluntarily offer those any conditions. So anyway, I kind of got off that topic maybe a little bit, but hopefully I answered your question. Questions on that?
Let me ask a question relative to that statement then. So in regards to this property, with concerns of the current condition that it's been left in, you could not offer a proposal that these issues be cleared before rezoning would be recommended?
You could, in my humble opinion, you could not have a condition associated with the rezoning. However, at this hearing tonight, you could tell the applicant, we're not willing to take action on this rezoning until you show some evidence that you are going to comply with those standards. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, very much so. Thank you.
Okay. I have a question. It's probably for Joe. Joe, when we talk about the future land use map that we're looking at and the zoning map that the one from 2012 that is zoned CA, was it zoned to be the light industrial or the planned development prior? It was prior to 2012. Was that just not noted?
It's not zoned. It's never been zoned. It was always a future land use.
Okay, so it was just
just
talked
like your
about.
future land use. That's the guiding map that we use to make zoning decisions.
And it was a future land use map prior to this one from 2015?
Yes. I think if you go back, I don't know if we have any iterations, but I can recall that when I was on the Planning Commission in 2002, that area had already been designated at that time on the future land use map.
And you had talked about, I hate to have you repeat, but it was designated on the future land use map back then. Yeah, but so I have the same one, but that's dated 15, so it was dated much farther, the predecessor to that map.
Yeah,
Right.
a new date goes on it every time we review it. I'm going to guess the future land use map is dated 2015 right now because we did that residential analysis a couple of years ago. So when we did that and we made those changes, that map now became dated 2015. We didn't change 99% of the map.
We also did it last year, though, didn't we? Was it last year?
Well, that's the 2015 I'm thinking because we're just into 5 months into 17. So I'm thinking 15 if that's the date that's going around.
Because we changed some categories last year.
In the residential area.
In the residential area.
Right, and I think that's why the map is dated 2015, because we didn't change zoning, we changed future land use map.
I think it's important for people to understand what the difference is, because it's often confused. mean, I think you did that at the beginning, but the future land use map it coincides with the comprehensive plan. You can't completely zone
categories.
You can't categorically keep certain things out of your community. You have to provide zoning areas or areas for future zoning for various uses. And so looking at the map, that's just, it's our map. It's a guide going out 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So when we are faced with a request for zoning, one of the first things a property owner is going to do is going to look at the future land use map. What are the things that are being considered by the township? Because that's what the township has adopted for future planning, for the future of the planning of the township. So that's why it may not be zoned CA, but the whole township was probably zoned CA at one time. And the idea here is the future land use is supposed to identify those areas. So.
And I'm believing not involved with the process of putting that purple on the map that I recall, so I'm thinking that it may have occurred prior to. But the analysis of what you put where, probably for light industrial versus GC, was a similar exercise to what we did with the residential analysis a year or two ago. You look at what you need, where do you need it? And I don't think we have a lot of light industrial. We don't have a lot of purple on the map.
I think it's also important for people to understand that anyone can come in and request a zoning change for their property. They can come in and they can ask for a zoning change. Doesn't mean they're going to get it, but they can ask for a zoning change. So someone living, in one of the other areas, maybe that's near a bunch of residential, could come in and ask for a light industrial. We're obligated to look around at the site and look at our future land use map and determine, does that make sense for that zoning to change for that property? And having a comprehensive plan and the map provides us with the guidance that in case we're challenged. Because once you grant a zoning classification, it's a right that runs with that property. All the attendant things that go along with that property, such as the property owner's reasonable investment-backed expectations associated with that zoning classification. And when communities take away zoning, they have to have a good reason to do so. They got to provide due process. And at the same time, someone requesting is entitled to due process. So the long and short of it is when we designate these things on our land use map, not our zoning map, for future planning, that's what the people who own the land expect to be able to do when they come into our township and say, oh, this is I've been identified. They can also come in when we review it, and we've had that happen, where property owners have come in and asked that the land use be changed to something other than what the township has designated. And sometimes we grant it, and sometimes we don't. But that's a different issue than getting a zoning classification.
So I can comment. I didn't go back and look 20 years back, but although the future land use plan, which is up there, depicts this in the research and development planned industrial category, the text part of the comprehensive plan, the written textual language that pertains to this property and identifies this particular property in this category is from 2011. So that gives you some, when they had adopted the amendment in 2011, they specifically were adding language to address this area of this in the comprehensive development plan. If that helps.
And I would guess that a lot of it goes back to infrastructure availability, utilities, the things that you talked about. It's an interchange.
Yeah.
The sewer line's running right there. I know there's been talk, while far away, there's been talk of water up there at some point. Would be nice as it develops.
Well, that, and there's also crisscrossing there are large pipelines that come across that area. So part of it is just the nature of where those pipelines, unfortunately across Hartland, we got pipelines that go completely cut through almost from corner to corner through Hartland. But in this particular area, I seem to recall also that one of the reasons that we felt that this was appropriate was just because of the nature of where those pipelines are located as well. So,
Yeah, I think it cuts just north of Clyde, I believe. Okay, anything else on that? All right. Troy, why don't you give us a little spot zoning opinion here?
So one of the provisions in the criteria for whether or not a zoning map amendment should be approved is that will the proposed rezoning result in spot zoning or exclusionary zoning, and those are terms in land use planning that are thrown around, and they have specific meaning in the context that they're used for land use planning, but I think it's important to kind of tell what those terms really mean, because the average person may not understand what that means. And I threw some background information in here for your information on, I think that comes from the MSU extension on land use planning, on spot zoning and exclusionary zoning. Spot zoning generally would be to rezone a single piece of land complete in isolation from other similarly zoned lands, that almost creates an island, if you will, of one parcel by itself, completely out of context with its surrounding environment. That certainly is not the case here. The other example would be exclusionary zoning, where it's almost the opposite, where you might be rezoning other lands but leaving a piece of land remaining where it would no longer be consistent with the surrounding area. So again, that's not what's happening here. So I don't want to dive into that too much, but just wanted to give you some background on that.
Okay. Item L, there hasn't been a submittal within the last year. M, other factors.
This is kind of a catch-all that the ordinance throws in there that allows the Planning Commission, if they feel there's some unusual or mitigating circumstances that aren't addressed in the other criteria, this is kind of your time as a Planning Commissioner to point out either specific concerns or reasons for wanting to support the request, whatever that may be. So.
Okay. Comments on anything? Thoughts?
All I'd like to touch on is the comment that Mike, a couple have touched on already, and that is, and I guess I'm learning tonight too, I drive by that corner every day, and if there was some enforcement that should have been done to maintain that lot, whether it's the maintaining the trees or covering the footings that are exposed or planting vegetation to soak up the water, etc., I just think that's something that if I was living there, I would want that looked closer. So I think in the future we just got to kind of watch that and be a little bit closer to the vest on it. Make sure those things are followed up on. That's just a comment.
We rely heavily on code enforcement of comments from citizens. And I have taken a number of calls personally on this property and talked with a number of residents that were not happy with the prior project, were not happy with the building materials being set out there. But for whatever reason in those conversations, I just never heard, or they never shared with me some of the things that were shared here tonight. So I heard some of those the first time myself, about some of the trees that are no longer alive, and we will certainly follow up on that.
I have same reservations. I'm contemplating, thinking we should maybe even consider tabling this application until we get to the bottom of what is not or needs to be done at that site. think that the residents around there are entitled, there were some obligations on the part of the landowner that had been fulfilled, and now he's in requesting some relief. I'm kind of troubled by that things weren't followed through. I get it. I understand. Projects, don't necessarily come out the way you want them to. If the building itself is going to end up being very similar to what was being proposed, then then maybe we could have more information that could be presented that we could look at for this part of the process. But we were sold on this before that there was going to be sufficient buffers between the use and the neighbors that surround that property. So that's kind of my thought. Just something considering. So I think the other board, I don't know how the other board members feel about it, but it wouldn't hurt to table this until we get to the bottom of what has been done and what's not been done and what needs to be done.
So I would agree with Joe. And for the mere fact that, if we're to support our community, we're to support the residents. When something is said that's going to be done, it needs to be done. And I think that we owe that to them, but we owe it to ourselves as a community. And I think we need to find out really what was supposed to be and what's not, and maybe that'll get those things done.
Mike?
I agree. I have no problem with the intention of rezoning the property as requested, but I certainly have many concerns that the property hasn't been maintained as agreed upon. In reading some of the background data, it appears that the township has been very cooperative in allowing the applicant to delay changes and updating the conditions of the property. But I'm in agreement. I think it's time that if there's a request to rezone, then it's a time for the applicant to come forward and show some real intent on maintaining what they promised to do. So I'm in favor of tabling it until we get further information and understanding.
Sue?
I can't say any more than all you guys have said. I agree completely.
Okay. I would agree. I don't necessarily have a problem with the request. I think that's probably what you're hearing here. I don't know if you have any comments to add to that or not, but...
No, I don't.
Okay. Troy, can we...
If I can, I don't have any problems with the request either. I think that given the history and given the location and everything we've talked about, that it is appropriate that we go forward, but I just don't think we're ready today.
May I make one comment?
Yeah.
If it is the intent of the township to develop industrial along that corridor, now's the time to do it. There's a foundation in the ground. There's $1 million worth of steel sitting there waiting to be put up. And just so you know, it can happen that quickly, but I understand your concern.
Well, probably whatever the 6 of 8 open items might be able to be dealt with quickly, too, because I think that's what we're referring to, are those. So I would probably be on the phone with the property owner discussing those open issues.
Absolutely.
And compliance to what was spoke about. I'm not sure how to address the issue of the steel being removed by June, whatever it is, because that's a month away. Certainly that one may have to be left open for a rezoning. But it sounds like we have other issues that go beyond just steel sitting in a vacant parcel of land.
It seems to me that part of what I recall, there was going to be a considerable amount of screening because of all the trees that were removed, correct?
Yes.
So if that's not going to change, I understand you need areas to when you're in the middle of construction, but it seems to me that those things could be there could be something done there to create that buffer that was promised.
What I would like to do is to approach the owner and request that he provide screening along the westerly portion of our property adjacent to the neighbors that would be consistent with what would be required. Would it be to rezoned industrial? and see if I could get him to do that prior to it being zoned industrial.
I think that would probably go a long way to easing some concerns.
Very good.
So I'll move to table this matter.
Okay, now Troy, my quick question for you, with this being a rezoning and all, can we do this without a date on it?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we have a motion to table.
Yes, actually, the way we're parliamentary procedure, if you make a motion to table it,
Right.
there's no discussion on a motion to table. It really just it stays on the table, so to speak, if it passes.
Right.
Till such time that we remove it from the table.
I just wasn't sure with the public hearing and the rezoning whether that was the appropriate way, but
I'm not going to be an expert on Robert's rules of
But I'm
parliamentary
comfortable.
procedure, but as long as you guys are clear in how you make your motion and what your expectations are for the applicant before he comes back, I think we'll be fine.
okay. So we have a motion to table.
I support.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Now, for the benefit of the public, because the next meeting would not be a public hearing, there will not be notification sent out to property owners with 300 feet. So we're probably going to have to ask you to keep attention to the township website, if you got cable TV, the township channel, so that you can make sure you stay informed as to when this pops back up. All right? We're good. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your
We look forward to
consideration.
seeing you back here soon.
I hope he's back next month.
All right. We're here. We have no old and new business. I'd like to go to item 9, call to the public. Is there anything that anybody would like to add this evening? Yep, we'll have you come forward in a second here.
I'll make it quick because I know these guys, and that's probably more to help with previous discussion. The 7 items is on packet, page 31 and 32.
Yep.
That'll help.
I knew it was there, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, planners report. Troy?
I wanted to report last week the Township Board and the Planning Commission had a joint meeting. We discussed a couple of topics, one of which is going to probably bring some work for the Planning Commission to do. The Township has sold a number of REUs on some vacant properties, and the board kind of gave at that meeting there was a little bit of a history given as to how those properties ended up with those REUs on them. I don't want to get into all the details of that, but I do want to give the Planning Commission a heads up that probably in our list down the road of things we're going to be looking at are amendments to the future land use map to address that situation. They also spent some time talking about the different demographics, age groups, and their housing needs and concerns of how to have a mix. And I think it's important to look at it from a mixture, not that we have all housing that accommodates one age group, but not the rest. So that was a good discussion. There was also a little discussion on what's commonly called new urbanism. So it was in my opinion, it was a good meeting, and hopefully those that were able to make it thought so. For those that didn't, I've tried to send out some background information on that, but if you were not able to make it, please feel free to reach out to me, and if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to help in any way I can. So.
Okay. Committee reports, comments, anyone? All right, motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Support.
Commissioner Kalani, Commissioner Mitchell, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries.